Hello, and welcome back to another Half Pint session. Today I'm interviewing the author of this rather delightful book that's got a beaver on the front of it, A Joyful Outpost. Aaron Bair, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So we'll get on to the Beaver book in a moment, and my wife has been referring to you as the Beaver guy pretty much this past week as she's seen me rereading your book. But would you mind just introducing yourself?
Yeah. I live in Salt Lake City, originally from Kansas City. I moved here when I was a kid. I've been married for 9 years. I have three little kiddos now, a 5, a 2, and a 1-year-old. So life's busy and it's great.
I bet.
Can't complain. um, yeah. And what else? I'm a deacon at my church. My daytime job is an English teacher at a local middle school here in the Salt Lake Valley. Been there for 4 years, and that's been great. And yeah, I wrote a book on Narnia, another book on Narnia. I mean, there's not enough of those, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
what I love about this is it's a clear thought. There was something very in particular that you wanted to say in this book, and we'll get to that in a moment. But actually, let's start with that. Why did you actually write this book? Why did you feel that the C.S. Lewis world needed another Narnia book?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I've been reading Lewis for a long time, pretty much as long as I can remember. Grew up on the Narnia Chronicles, of course, but then later in life, as I got a little bit older, got into his apologetics and whatnot. So I've been swimming in Lewis's ideas for a long time, and the past few years, I've been really convicted about household stuff, about recapturing a biblical household as a father and as a husband, leading my household well. And so that's just been on my mind a lot. And I read a book recently it was a few years ago at this point, but a book about Tom Bombadil from Lord of the Rings. And it's by a Christian pastor. Total shout out to this book. It's a great book called In the House of Tom Bombadil by C.R. Wiley. But he's essentially engaging with Tolkien's work, but then kind of fleshing out like the theology of it, and really talking about like Tom and Goldberry's dynamic. I just thought it was really good, and that was one of my favorite books to read that year. And so I started thinking, I know Lewis pretty well. Is there any example that's similar there? And so first thing that came to my mind was the Beavers. So I started researching and doing a little bit of writing there. I thought at first this is going to be just like a few blog posts I can throw on my website or whatnot. But then I realized just how much there was, and I realized this actually could be a book. And so I went for it and wrote it.
Well, I mean that's a big jump, though. A lot of people think that they have a book in them, and maybe do a couple of blog posts, but you actually went all the way, and I'm always impressed by someone that does that. As someone who has a completed manuscript for a book that is just sitting on my Google Drive that I'm doing absolutely nothing with, so that I find that very impressive.
Well, there are plenty of those on my Google Drive as well. This is the one that got over the finish line.
Yeah, and let's talk about a little bit of the contents. Can you just give us a flavor of the sorts of things that you're examining? Because I think most people would say, well, the Beavers they're a side character. They appear in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and they make a brief cameo back in The Last Battle. But why make an entire book about them? What makes the Beavers special?
Yeah. At the start, I mean, they're actually one of the only married couples in the Chronicles, which does make them unique in a sense. I think the only other married couple that we can draw from is Caspian and his marriage to Ramandu's daughter in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. We don't get much in terms of a marriage dynamic between them, right?
You've also got the king and queen, the first king and queen in The Magician's Nephew, the cabbie and his wife.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yep, you're right. And but they're clearly, the Beavers are clearly the one of the best examples there. And and so this book is largely there is some literary analysis for sure, especially in the early chapters, but it also goes into kind of an applied theology focus in the later chapters, and kind of talking about what the Beavers do in the story and why it's important.
As I was reading the book, it actually put me in mind of a conversation I had with Chris Pipkin from the Inklings Variety Hour podcast, because we'd been kicking around. We entitled it "Raising Kids in Narnia" because both of us also have young children, and we're heading to the age where we're going to start introducing them to Narnia. And he and I were having a conversation and talking about what do we think we've learned about parenthood from the Chronicles of Narnia. And yeah, your book very much reminded me of that, but it was also much more of a reflection of both what Scripture says about how households work and seeing traces of that within Lewis's own Chronicles.
Yeah, for sure. I would say Lewis didn't set out to write the Chronicles of Narnia with like the Beavers at the forefront of his mind. I think it was just kind of like well, yeah, of course. If there's a married couple in the Chronicles, this is kind of how they're gonna function. And yeah, there's so much to draw from for the Beavers. And so at the start of the book, I talk a little bit about the place of beavers in Lewis's writing. That's not the first instance that we see beavers in his writing, and then kind of go into the importance that they have, and really drawing on some theological principles. So it goes into masculinity, femininity, hospitality, true biblical rest. What does that look like? Yeah, there's actually quite a bit that Lewis drops in there. And again, I think a lot of it is just like, well, yeah, of course, this is just how marriage should look. But I think in our day and age, we find ourselves in the throes of winter. We can totally talk about the witch's winter, and having a couple like the Beavers, which is very countercultural nowadays. And so I thought that was part of why I wrote it as well. I think it's just an important message for our times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, particularly with regards to hospitality, because the beavers are about their food, but it's not the same as gluttony. And they're also about their rest, but that's not the same as slothfulness or being sloven. Actually, when I was reading your section on that, it actually reminded me of the work of Joseph Pieper. He's written a lot about what true biblical rest actually means. And so that was ringing through my ears as I was reading through that section.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the rest chapter right now?
Sure, go for it. Why don't you give us some of the highlights?
Sure. Yeah. And actually, that's probably a good starting point, because that was the first chapter that I wrote for the manuscript, even though it ends up being towards the back of the book. It was the first one that I wrote. And, this is after they leave the Beavers' home, the Pevensies, minus Edmund, with the Beavers, and they're making their way to Aslan's camp. And, they're trying to not be overtaken by the White Witch. And so they're kind of in a race. It's a little bit different because they know they can't outrun the witch, but so they're trying to not use the wood, the forest to their advantage. And but they're in the middle of this chase, trying to just get there safely. And then Mr. Beaver comes out of his little hole to see what's going on, and of course it's Father Christmas here, right? And so they meet with him, and he gives them these iconic gifts. So Peter gets his sword and the shield. Susan gets her bow and the horn. Lucy gets her healing cordial and the dagger. Mr. Beaver gets his dam rebuilt or repaired, and Mrs. Beaver gets the new sewing machine that she had to unfortunately leave behind before they left, the one that she was very fond of. And I talk about the sewing machine quite a bit in the book too. I'm sure you know. But the item that I focused on in that chapter was something that came right after all those gifts, was a great big teapot, which
it made me so happy as an Englishman that you focused on that.
Yeah, I'm more of a coffee guy nowadays, but there was a season where I was really into a cuppa, as you guys would say.
Okay, but you've backslidden since then. We'll pray for you.
Sorry, yeah, I'm still being sanctified, right? It's a lifelong process. Yeah, and so it's just kind of a peculiar scene because they're in the middle of a chase, right? They're trying to get there safely, and yet Father Christmas gives them a great big teapot. And you can imagine, since it's a great big teapot, tea time lasted a bit longer than usual. So just imagine that scene where the witch is, she's in her fury and unrest, trying to get to um, get to the Pevensies and the Beavers. And they're just hanging out, and the rest of them are just hanging out in the forest, just drinking tea. And it's just a peculiar scene, but it's so profound because as the witch is raging, the world is being put to rights. Father Christmas has come, spring is coming, the witch's endless winter is ending, and the the beavers and the Pevensies are resting in that truth. And in a sense, in that scene, rest takes an active form, not a passive form. You can even say that it was warfare against the winter because it was that kind of response, that kind of disposition that is allowing the spell to crumble in the first place, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I really like that section. The other section I wanted to talk to you about, because it was my other favorite, was on the subject of hospitality, because it's one of the things that I'm particularly passionate about in regards to any local congregation that I'm a part of, to make sure that there is hospitality regularly. I told my pastor the other day, I think more souls have been lost for want of a cup of coffee and a donut than anything else. So what do we learn from the Beavers regarding hospitality?
Yeah. Uh, at the very start, you know, they are, well, maybe it's to back up for a sec to set the stage. The Pevensies, they are, when they meet Mr. Beaver, they are reeling because the one person that Lucy knew, Mr. Tumnus, has been arrested. Um, and so they're like, well, what do we do? And then they see the robin. They don't know if to trust it. But then they meet Mr. Beaver, and he ushers them into his home. And I love when they enter into his home because then Lewis pivots to the she beaver, Mrs. Beaver, sitting behind her sewing machine, and just in an instant, she's up. She's playing the host. She's welcoming them into her home. She's whisking the girls along to help her cook for the meal. Mr. Beaver is catching the fish. Right? Um, they. It's just it's not even really a question, right? They see these people in need. They see these people who are burdened, and they take them into their home to love on them and to encourage them and to, I mean, uh, I made a tweet about this the other day, but when the Beavers are around the table and they're just with the Pevensies, and they're enjoying the meal of the boiled potatoes and the freshly caught fish and all the wonderful stuff there. Um, then Mr. Beaver gets into the prophecies of spring, right? And then he gives us probably the most iconic line from the Chronicles about Aslan, right? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. That's from Mr. Beaver's mouth, and that's an element of also family worship. I don't know. I thought it was kind of just a cool little tidbit, but you know, yeah, it's not even a question to the Beavers. Are they are playing host to image the great host, which is, of course, our Creator, who has welcomed us into the home that He's built, the world that He's built.
That chapter and that scene, because here you have this delicious meal, this wonderful fellowship, the sharing of the good news of Aslan, and all this other wonderful stuff is happening in the context of a winter and in a world that the Pevensies have recently discovered is exceptionally dangerous and that there is an enemy out to get them. And so between that scene, the title of your book, A Joyful Outpost, it put me in mind of Rod Dreher's book called The Benedict Option. And for people that aren't familiar with the book, Rod Dreher, he's just talking about Saint Benedict of Nursia, who founded the Benedictine order. So you had all the way through Europe, all of these monasteries popping up that were these beacons, these places that retained the knowledge, kept the faith, were the centers of learning, pretty much as most of Europe was sort of falling to pieces. But these were these outposts that people could come to and that would be pouring into their local communities to give them life again. And that was my main takeaway from the book, that we're called to ensure that our own homes are these joyful outposts, these signs of life in a world that isn't always particularly friendly, period, but particularly friendly to the Christian message.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the most profound image for me as well. The wonderful picture of Pauline Baines of the Beavers sitting down to dinner with the Pevensies, right? What you see there is warmth. What you see there is joy. What you see there is feasting and revelry, right? But then if you kind of back up and understand the setting of Narnia, how it's this endless winter, right? According to Mr. Tumnus, it's always winter, but never Christmas. You can't look forward to spring, can't look forward to anything. It's just always winter. And it's essentially, a slow death for everything. It's creation warring against what the Lord has made, what the Lion has made. It's essentially, thorns and thistles from Genesis 3 when the fall happens. And here, to what you said, in the midst of all that, here's a joyful outpost. Here's the beavers just enjoying what they've been given, and also Mr. Beaver is playing the prophet. He is telling the kids about Aslan and the good news of that. And I think that's so important for us today. Like, our households need to look that way as we live in winter, or as Lewis would say in other places, enemy occupied territory.
Mm-hmm. Love it. So that was A Joyful Outpost. Do you have any other books that you're thinking of working on, blog posts to convert and assemble?
Yeah, throwing around some ideas. I'm over the summer. I got like a week or two more before I'm on summer break, and I'm going to devote some time to Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen. So I'm not sure what's going to come of that. The starting idea is to write just a reader's guide, but make it a little bit more reader friendly. The ones that I've read are a little esoteric, but and I think it's just a really important work, And Lewis was very fond of Spenser, so we'll see if anything comes about with that. Apart from that, I'll just be working on Sunday school stuff for our church and just doing whatever the Lord calls me to do.
We had an episode on Spenser this season as part of Jack's Bookshelf, and I've only really just started it, but I had read all of Lewis's comments about it, and the thought of trying to do a reader's guide makes my head spin, and given what he said, that it's pretty much, you turn the page and it's like you're rounding a corner and you have no idea what you're about to meet.
Yeah.
And as a work, it does seem to be kind of meandering in a good way, but it's not like something that you can neatly sum up. It's sort of just a rollicking adventure that takes lots of unexpected turns with lots of, you get a character is introduced and then they suddenly disappear for the rest of the book.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Pray for me. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I think it'll be helpful for me, even if it doesn't really go anywhere in terms of publishing something. I think it'll still be a benefit to me.
Mm-hmm. I've definitely found that's true for podcasting on a book. If nothing else, it makes me pay an awful lot more attention when I've at least got to sort of sit down and write up a summary of what happened. What did we learn? What were the main points?
Sure. Also, I have to commend you for the idea of your podcast. Chatting C.S. Lewis when you have a brew in hand.
Oh, it's beautiful. What are you drinking? What are you drinking?
I am drinking. It's a whiskey barrel stout from a brewery in Kansas City. It's my hometown.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So if people want to pick up a copy of the book or find out more about you, or reach out to you, where should they go?
Yeah. So you can find my book on Amazon. Just type in my name or the title of the book, Joyful Outpost, and it'll pop up. You could even type in Beaver book or Beaver in Narnia. It'll pop up. There's kind of a niche subject. I'm kind of the only one who's written on the beavers. Proudly. And you can also go to my website, just myname.com, so aaronbair.com.
Wonderful stuff. Well, I'll make sure there are links to all of that in the show notes. Aaron Bair, thank you for coming on the show.
Of course. Thanks for the invitation.
And viewers, please join us again next time when we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.